Alchemy is one of the most magical words in our language, and it means transformation. Transformation is simply change. Life is constantly changing all around us. But not all of this change qualifies as alchemy. Only those changes that transform the essence, the substance of existence. In legend, alchemy denoted the wizard's power to turn base metal into gold. However, that was a symbol for a deeper, much more profound transformation, the alchemy of spirit. That is the kind of alchemy I will be telling you about tonight with the help of these gifted people who are here to narrate the story of true alchemy, by which the most common stuff of everyone's existence, our everyday feelings, wishes, desires, and longings, gets transformed into the most precious stuff of life, pure spirit. The realization of everything you can become as a human being. There are many frameworks for discussing spiritual transformation. The most magical, at least for me, is the legend of Merlin and the teachings he handed down in that mythic past when humans were still immersed in wonder and miracle. Merlin is a wizard, and I believe in wizards because I believe that nothing mythical or magical cannot come true. Whatever you can think or wish or dream about can come true. That is the secret of alchemy. And in the voice of Merlin, we hear not some far-removed exotic creature, but the wizard inside ourselves. The inner wizard is that part of ourselves that is unaffected by time and space and the mundane events of the material world. The inner wizard is that part of ourselves that is not confused and anxious, but which has absolute knowledge, absolute certainty, absolute assurance in our divine nature. Alchemy is the wizard's art because the base stuff of our existence, this disguise of flesh and blood that decays with time, hides a precious core of pure consciousness living in the timeless. The inner wizard is silent and pure, the inextinguishable spark of life. Know him or her, listen to his faint but ever-present voice, and you will be taught the spiritual lessons that create transformation. The mind cannot do this for you because the mind is cluttered with memories of the past, and the spirit is not in the past. Likewise, emotions cannot bring about transformation because they are rooted in conditioning and imprints placed upon you from early childhood. Mind and emotion cannot grasp the magic of the present moment. It is in the present, this ever-renewing point of invisibility, that the wizard is found. The present moment is the only particle of time that never dies. It is pure transformation, and therefore pure alchemy. The inner wizard knows eternity not as an endless stretch of unfolding time, but as this utterly simple thing, the present moment, where the totality of spirit lives. Another name for pure spirit is the Holy Grail, which is another familiar yet magical ingredient in the story of Camelot, Merlin, and King Arthur. Whoever captures the Grail captures God's total love and blessing, which again touches a deep wish wrapped in the mystery of alchemy. The Grail is a powerful Christian symbol, but I am going to speak of it as a universal symbol that resonates and speaks to all of us, no matter what our religious belief. Symbols have a way of taking on a life of their own, and it amazes me how potently alive Merlin and the Grail and Arthur still are. Why? Because the spiritual quest will renew itself as long as there are humans wanting to unfold answers to those questions that children naturally ask, but which we adults soon suppress. Who am I? Why am I here? Is there a God? Does He know I exist? We are going to try to approach these questions tonight through the imagination, because imagination can pierce deeper than logic or reason. Fairy tales and poetry and legends move us with the mystery of life. And since spirit is deeply mysterious to most people, I thought it was fitting to call upon Merlin, King Arthur, and the Grail quest to light the way for us. As the tale unfolds, I will interrupt with occasional commentary and explanation, and you will begin to see, I hope, that there is a definite method, definite laws and rules that apply to alchemy. In fact, there are 7 distinct stages each of us experiences on the spiritual path. And when you are at one stage, your life is totally transformed from the stage you just left behind and the stage that lies just ahead. This is the kind of knowledge wizards possessed and which they held in keeping for the whole human race. If we want this knowledge back, we need to go to them. So let's listen now and hear the voice inside us. Let's enter the wizard's world.
In King Arthur's time, it was all the rage to go on a quest in search of the Holy Grail. Tossing in their beds o' nights, every one of Arthur's liege knights dreamed of acquiring this prize, which would bring God's protection and blessing to their king. If a cave should be discovered in the limestone hills jutting on the horizon of Camelot, it would be instantly occupied with some knight doing penance in hopes of gaining a vision of the Grail. With all their visions and dreams, people came to see the Grail as an ornate golden goblet inlaid with jewels.
It is nearly impossible to convince mortals that quests are never for outward things, however holy, Merlin told Arthur.
Arthur remembered those words whenever Grail fever reached a pitch in his court, which was usually in the long, dark months of December when the knights were bored and restless from want of exercise. The younger ones in particular were forever champing to quest to the Holy Land or to the castle at Montsalvat or any place, mythical or real, where the Grail might be kept.
The king himself kept aloof from the buzzing talk. "If you want to go," he would say, his voice trailing off.
What? Don't you believe in the Grail? A rash knight asked impetuously.
"Believe?" Arthur replied quietly, "Yes, but not in the way you think."
His answer was troubling. Is the Grail real, my lord? Galahad asked. He was a gentler soul, and the king regarded his question with more favor.
"You ask as if you think I've beheld it," Arthur said, but not another word could be coaxed from his lips.
Then one night in earliest spring, just as the fields were thawing and nodding jonquils, no longer than a thumbnail, had burst like gold among the fading Christmas roses, a fire could be seen at a distance outside the walls of Camelot. Around the fire sat Sir Galahad, and with him Sir Percival, who had together pledged to hold a holy retreat. Percival lifted his older head and said to fair Galahad, "I tell you, brother, my soul burns to capture this thing, the Grail." "The king says it isn't a thing," the younger knight reminded him. Percival brushed this aside impatiently. "But he also says Merlin brought the Grail into England. Well, you heard him yourself, didn't you?" Galahad merely nodded and threw some dry hazel brush into the fire. "I don't know if my heart is pure enough to gain the Grail, and I'm not so vain or stupid as to believe it must fall into my hands, but my heart will be sore until I try."
At that moment, the two companions heard the crunch of footsteps lightly breaking through the thin layer of ice still covering the shaded ground nearby. They tensed, waiting for the stranger to identify himself, when a faintly mocking voice said, "Don't be frightened and pray me leave. I need a fire, if you know how to build one."
Percival looked at Galahad, then called into the darkness, "Why, be off and build your own fire. This is a retreat of two knights who must not have exchange with the world's vanity."
A laugh came back in reply, even more stinging than the earlier mockery. "Build my own fire, you say? then I shall.
Before these words died on the frosty air, Percival jumped to his feet in alarm because the ground under his breeches had caught fire. Galahad looked around in amazement to see that a flaming circle now surrounded them, springing from the frozen earth itself. Before he could cry out, a tall figure, gaunt as an old fir tree, walked through the fire and stood over them. "Merlin," Galahad whispered, "what brings you here after this long leave?"
Not your insolent friend here. Merlin was eyeing Percival, who was trying to maintain whatever scrap of dignity a man can possess when his backside is on fire. Sit down. Sit down.
Percival felt the embarrassing pain go away, and he took his seat, very carefully, next to Galahad, with Merlin opposite them. Neither had ever set gaze upon him before, but Arthur's description had been accurate, right down to the wizard's cruel slippers of worn black moleskin and his long beard, which looked like forked lightning.
Don't stare. I'm thinking.
Percival asked, "About what?"
And don't interrupt, was all the wizard had to say in reply. After a moment, his rather hard-set expression softened. Yes, I believe you are telling the truth. Now the only problem is what to do about it.
Galahad said, "Well, we most earnestly desire to follow this quest, Master Merlin."
Your king spoke aright, you know. The Grail isn't a thing you can run after on horseback like a fox. It isn't made of gold, and therefore brings no one a material reward. Neither can it be hoarded in secret. And possessing it doesn't confer God's blessing any more than not possessing it.
This was too much for Percival, who was growing more and more agitated. "How can you say that? The Grail must confer God's blessing."
Merlin stopped him with a scathing look. My dear clod, if all this world is God's creation, then how could any part of it, however remote or small or unimportant, be any less blessed than any other?
"But there is a Grail, isn't there?" asked Galahad hastily. "The king told us that you are its protector."
Merlin nodded. Bright lad, I protect what needs no protection. I guide the quest that cannot take you anywhere. And in the end, I will be there when you find the Grail, though you will see neither me nor it.
Percival suddenly stood up. "Well, if I am the clod here, let me take my leave. I wouldn't want to lower the conversation."
Merlin's demeanor softened. I meant no offense. You are what you are, which seems to be good enough in God's eyes, and rare enough in this hopeless world. Take your place, if you please. There is a rule that cannot be disobeyed. When the pupil is ready, the master appears. What you wish to know, I can teach you. My opening remarks were not rude or mystical. I only want you to clear your heads of any musty dreams you have about the Grail. Attend to me.
With a curious flick of his hand, Merlin caused the ring of fire to die down around them to a dull glow. And now his craggy features were barely visible by the embers of the campfire. The two knights saw him mostly as a wreath of luminescent white hair lit by the rising moon.
The quest that brings the Grail as its prize is not a journey of the kind ignorant knights crave to mount. It is an inner journey, a quest of transformation. You have both heard tell of this thing called alchemy?
Percival and Galahad nodded, dim figures outlined in the cloaking darkness.
Alchemy is the art of transformation, and when its 7 steps are achieved, then, and only then, will you be able to summon the Grail.
7 steps, Percival asked. Then the Grail is made of gold after all. I know that alchemists turn lead into gold.
Cobwebs and rubbish. You know little or nothing about this art, and yet you have practiced it every day since you were born. Every baby is born an alchemist, then loses the art only to gain it again.
I hope you are intrigued at this point. Merlin has established the rules of the game, as it were. The Grail is real, but not a thing. It is everywhere and nowhere. Therefore, you can't go after it. Yet, through an inner quest, you can find it. And when you touch the prize, the inner wizard will be there beside you. In one form or another, every spiritual tradition contains this knowledge, and poses this riddle. Saints, avatars, and gurus are different guises for Merlin, each playing the wizard's role. Right now, we live in a material age, and scientific questing is much easier for us to understand than inner questing. A wizard would say, we have lost our ability to hear the voice of spirit. And yet, since we were all born as innocents without judgment against spirit, we are naturally alchemists. If we could only pick up the thread again, we are the heroes and heroines of our own Grail quest. But first you have to realize that there is a quest. Here's another way to put it, as imparted to the young King Arthur.
After the boy Arthur left Merlin's cave, he lived with old Sir Ector and his son Kay. Arthur was given the position of squire, but this was in name only, for the boy had no family or possessions. He couldn't afford to buy his own suit of livery, and behind Sir Ector's back, the stable boys used to throw mud at him, and the maids whispered that he knew black magic. As a result, Arthur spent much of his time alone. One day he was sitting on the edge of a grove of oaks, staring at a battered water pitcher, when Kay happened to come across him. "Did you steal that?" Kay asked suspiciously. "No," Arthur replied, shaking his head. "I borrowed it. I needed something made of lead." "What for?" Kay asked. "Alchemy." Kay's eyes grew wild. "You were taught alchemy?" Arthur nodded. "If you can change lead to gold," Kay said excitedly, "our family will be the richest in England. Show me." Arthur nodded and waved Kay to sit beside him on the grass. Without another word, he began to stare at the lead pitcher. After a moment, Kay noticed that Arthur's eyes were closed. He waited impatiently, but when Arthur opened his eyes 15 minutes later, the pitcher was unchanged. "I think you're a fraud," Kay said hotly. "That pitcher is still made of lead." Arthur looked confused. "Well, of course it is, can't you see? I'm the one who's trying to turn to gold."
So now we are started on our inner quest with the knowledge that alchemy is going to be performed on us. We were born for transformation, as Merlin goes on to explain.
The greatest waste in existence is the waste of spirit. Each of you mortals came into the world to seek the Grail. No one is born more privileged than any other, because to a wizard, everyone is born to reach freedom and fulfillment.
Aren't I already free? Percival asked.
In the most literal sense, yes, since you are not held captive. But I mean freedom in a deeper sense. The ability to do anything you want, whenever you want. And there are even deeper levels to my meaning. You mortals think you are not held captive, but in fact you are held captive all the time by the past. Your memories create the conditioning that literally runs your life. If you were free of the past, you could master your own life. You could step into infinite possibilities, breaking the barrier of the known at every moment. The Grail is just a visible promise that such perfection exists. You understand?
The wizard didn't wait for their assent now that he had warmed to his subject.
The first step of alchemy begins at birth. It is known as innocence. Of all the ingredients employed by the alchemist, this is the most important. A newborn baby does not question its existence. It lives in self-acceptance, trust, and love. The nagging voice of doubt is yet silent. The question of who am I is meaningless to an infant. Instead, what shines through is awareness itself, the source of all wisdom. A baby comes into this world from the very source of life, and it detaches from that source gradually. For a while, a baby remains bathed in the timeless. It has no concept of past or future, only an unfolding present that never fades. This is what it means to live in eternity. For what is the eternal but the present moment, ever renewing itself? The very promise of the Grail, immortal life, is already being enjoyed by a baby, for living in innocence is the secret to immortality.
Merlin has said that we are all born still attached to the timeless source of life. If that's true, we might ask, then why aren't we all immortal from birth? Seeds and tendencies, that would be the wizard's answer. In every baby is instilled the tendency to move from the timeless world into the world of hours and days and years, from the inner silence of the inner world to the noisy activity of the outer world, which is, of course, where you and I find ourselves. Watch an infant in its first few weeks of life. You can see its attention becoming attracted to this brave new world all around. And so the alchemy begins, the constant transformation that will underlie every breath taken for all the years to come. Curiosity pulls the infant's attention, and at the same time, seeds begin to sprout. Inside, a baby harbors the beginnings of anger and fear, distrust and doubt. Religions call this the fall from grace, which still has some truth in it. As a baby moves out of its state of innocence, it falls into a harsher world of bumps and bruises. Desires spring up that are not immediately fulfilled. Pain is experienced. Even so, you are wrong to think that you ever departed from grace. Grace operates at every step of human existence, though our limited perception may prevent us from seeing it. The eyes cannot see that each of us is infinite spirit, one with the universe. Here's a little tale about that.
In the years Arthur spent with Merlin in the Crystal Cave, many mysteries were presented to him. One evening, Merlin challenged him with a question.
How far away is that star, do you suppose? He asked, pointing to the dog star. It being midsummer, Sirius was bright and low on the horizon.
I don't know. I suppose it must be farther than I can measure or possibly imagine.
It is no distance at all. Consider, for you to see that star, its light must enter your eye, correct? Beams of light flow continuously from here to there like an invisible bridge. What is a star but light? Therefore, if its light is both here and there and on the bridge in between, there is no separation between you and the star. You are both part of the same seamless field of light.
But the star is still separate from me. It appears to be very far. After all, I can't pluck it out of the sky.
Separation is only an appearance. You appear to be separate from me and other people because your ego takes the view that we are all isolated and alone. But I assure you, if you set your ego aside, you would see all of us surrounded by one unending field of light, which is awareness. Your every thought is born in a vast ocean of light, only to return to it, along with every cell of your body. The field of awareness is everywhere, an invisible bridge to all else that exists. So there is nothing about you that isn't part of everyone else, except as ego sees it. Your work is to go beyond ego and dive into the universal ocean of consciousness.
Arthur had a pondering look on his face. I'll have to think about what you've said.
A newborn, immersed in its own being, is naturally connected with the infinite ocean of consciousness. Even if you don't remember this stage of your existence, innocence hasn't been permanently lost, only submerged. If you wish to contact the innocence within you, look for the characteristics of the infant: alertness, curiosity, a sense of wonder, security that you're wanted on this earth, a feeling that beyond the tumult of time lies the perfect peace of the timeless.
Merlin continued speaking to Percival and Galahad.
Once the outer world begins to seem separate from the infant, a new stage is entered. It is known as the birth of the ego. Ego is simply the sense of I or myself. To have an I, you must also have you or it. The birth of ego is therefore also the birth of duality. Every new step in alchemy overturns the one that came before, turning your old world upside down. But this birth of ego is perhaps the most shocking. You are no longer a god. Imagine a being who feels omnipotent. Everywhere he looks, all that greets his eye is a mirror of himself. Suddenly, foreign bodies enter the reflection. Creatures who think of themselves as equal suddenly appear. How bizarre! None of you mortals remember when this startling event happened. Yet it was a momentous change. You were happy as a god. Now you were born into mortality.
It was a birth into pain, too, said Percival somberly. Was this step absolutely necessary?
Oh, yes. Seeds and tendencies must sprout, Merlin replied. Every baby must come to realize that there is something other than itself in the world. But do not grieve over lost innocence, my knight, for it is the ego that sets you off on your quest.
The birth of the ego is an important step because it gives birth to the outside world. The ego is like a paring knife, slicing experience into inner and outer. The infant ego starts noticing, this is me, that is not me. Then gradually, certain things become identified with me. My mommy, my toys, my hunger, my pain, my feelings. Some of these feelings are nicer than others. As soon as preferences arise, then in a flash, there's a whole world out there that isn't me. Not my mommy, not my toys, and so forth. None of us can remember leaving the state of innocence for the state of ego, but we certainly remember the fascination and curiosity that was embodied in the outside world. Thus we begin our quest. From the earliest age, we search and we crave, we wish and we explore. The latter steps of alchemy simply make the quest more specific, because at first all we know is that things out there are fascinating. We want to touch, see, taste, and above all, possess. Why is this quest for possession there? Because it isn't comfortable to live with this distinction between me and not me. Why can't this toy be mine? Why can't I have all the love? Why can't I have control over everything I see? It is amazing the extent to which all our adult craving for possessing and owning is really just an extension of this birth of the ego experienced as babies. The compulsion to possess and own and conquer came about once you lost the ability to see yourself as the true source of all that is. The innocent newborn baby was not wrong to see itself as the center of the universe. However, as you began to explore the outer world more and more, its objects became so fascinating that you tied your happiness to them. This is called object referral, which came to replace the baby's self-referral. You became addicted to the world as you remain today because you were no longer fulfilled in that simple way that a baby is. As the quest unfolds, the union of inner and outer fulfillment will come back only in the ultimate stages of evolution. Now is just the beginning stage where the ego first acquaints each of us with all the feelings associated with it. Fear of abandonment, the need for approval, possessiveness, separation anxiety, self-concern, self-pity, and self-image. People who prominently display these characteristics have remained identified with the second step of alchemy. Let's allow ourselves a glimpse of how the wizard manages to transcend ego and live in freedom outside its walls.
Merlin usually preferred to avoid the sight of mortals, but on a long summer eve he could occasionally be spotted, standing on one foot at the edge of a field. Curious, a farmer might come up to gawk at him, but Merlin would stand like a statue, making no sound or movement. And the boy Arthur thought his master looked like an old crane poised to spear a fish in the marsh. One day, after Merlin had stared into a pond for several hours, the boy couldn't help asking what he was looking for.
I cannot say exactly. I saw a dragonfly and wanted to look at it more closely. It flew across my path like a fluttering dream, but after a moment I forgot whether I was dreaming of this dragonfly or whether it was dreaming of me.
Isn't the answer obvious? Merlin gave the boy a sharp thump on the head.
You think your dreams exist there inside your brain, but I find myself everywhere, both inside my head and outside. So who knows which part of me is dreaming, some other part? This is one mystery wizards have not yet solved. I have told you that the birth of the ego makes you aware of a world out there. This gives rise to the tendency to go out into this world and achieve. The earliest signs of this are primitive. The growing baby starts to walk and begins to protest if its mother won't let it. This desire to escape and roam is timid at first, but over time, the same baby that yearned to be held and protected wails to be let go. This is a healthy instinct, for the ego knows that the unknown is the source of all fear. If the baby did not go out to conquer the world, it would grow to fear it more and more. We are now moving further away from the sense of peace, unity, and trust that you were born with. The ego starts to dominate over the spirit. When the baby reaches inside itself, it doesn't find pure awareness anymore, but a whirl of impulses, old and new. The new impulses are desire, the old ones, memories. As soon as you have your own memories, experience has become personal, never again to be fully shared.
This is a very sad tale, Percival mourned.
Merlin looked unperturbed. True, your ego is controlling and loveless. Its version of things is very seductive, however. Listen to me, it whispers, and grab all you can for yourself. Remember that everyone else wants to grab whatever you don't, so get yours first. That is the way to happiness. All of you mortals follow this advice for a while. Nor is there any harm in it, not from God's point of view, because He trusts you, and in time this trust turns out to be the wisest course. If alchemy stopped here with the achiever, you would be stranded in isolation. But the birth of the achiever also gave you confidence and a sense of uniqueness. Look around you at this world of objects and events. What is it about? It is about one thing only: becoming an individual.
I have projected the same images day after day, becoming a prisoner of the known. But the known is dead and past now, and I must buy my ticket to freedom by embracing the fresh unknown. Chance encounters, unexpected coincidences, premonitions, dreams and wishes, flashes of unpredictable joy, random events are taking meaning, weaving themselves in the web of time. I have left the voice of reason. I'm listening to the beckoning whisper in the recesses of my heart, and new shapes of reality are coaxing me out of my prison. When you passed through the birth of the achiever, new things became important to you. Success, solving problems, competing with others, making sure your self-image expanded. Of course, not everyone sees themselves as an achiever. So is this step really necessary? Yes, for although not everyone prizes success above everything else, or identifies with money, work, and status, the achiever is more basic than that. It is the ego in action, proving to itself that separation is endurable. If you lost your inner peace and fulfillment with nothing to compensate for that loss, separation would be tragic. Instead, the birth of the achiever makes this a joyous world full of things to learn and to do. In some people, the achiever will last a very long time. The thirst for fame and fortune will overwhelm the true purpose of their quest. But God permits complete free will. And if a person decides that the world out there is more important than himself or herself, then a craving for fame and fortune must follow, because humans are created to want more and more fulfillment. It's an illusion to claim, however, that a person can stop evolving. However long you choose to linger in these earlier ego-dominated stages of alchemy, transformation cannot be halted, only postponed. The ego, as a wizard sees it, has no fulfillment at all, and therefore is false. Here's a lesson from Merlin to make the point.
Merlin disappeared from Arthur's world long before he became king, only to suddenly reappear one day walking out of the forest up to the castle. Overjoyed to see his old master, Arthur ordered a royal banquet in his honor. But Merlin acted bewildered.
Perhaps I might attend if you would tell me truly, who are you?
Arthur was astonished, but before he could protest, Merlin addressed the assembled court in a loud voice.
I shall offer this bag of gold dust to anyone who can tell me who this person is.
And immediately a purse bulging with pure dust of gold appeared in the wizard's hands. Baffled, none of the Round Table Knights uttered an answer, but a brash young page ventured, "We all know who this is. It's the king." Merlin shook his head and curtly dismissed the page from the hall.
Don't any of you know who this is?
"Well, surely it is Arthur," another voice cried out. "Even a fool knows that." Merlin spotted where the voice came from. It was an old serving maid in the corner and briskly ordered her from the room. The whole court was now in confusion, but at the same time the wizard's challenge quickly turned into a game. All kinds of answers began to fly. This was the son of Uther Pendragon, ruler of Camelot, sovereign of England. Merlin accepted none of these answers, nor the more clever guesses such as son of Adam, flower of Albion, a man among men, etc. Eventually, Queen Guinevere herself was drawn in. "Why, this is my beloved husband," she murmured. Merlin only shook his head and sent her from the hall. One by one, each person was dismissed until no one remained except Merlin and the king.
Wizard, you have stymied us all, Arthur admitted, but I am sure I know who I am. Therefore, my answer is this. I am Merlin's old friend and disciple, who loves him above all mortal men.
After the briefest of hesitations, Merlin greeted this last answer with the same dismissal as all the others, and the king had no choice but to leave. Curiosity, however, made him stop and look down upon the great hall from a balcony. To his surprise, Merlin walked over to a casement window, opened the purse, and flung the gold dust into the open air.
Why did you throw away that precious gold? Arthur cried out. Merlin looked up.
I had to. The wind told me who you are.
The wind? But it didn't say anything.
Exactly, he replied with a smile.
The moral of this tale is that we have no name ultimately but spirit, which is as free as the wind. However, none of us needs reminding that the achiever who wants to make a name for himself in the world remains with us a long time, decades after we grow up. As long as ego is present, the achiever will be present too. The achiever never satisfies its appetites, and you might think nothing could sway it. After all, there is no limit to the experiences that you can amass. The world is infinite in its diversity, but as the ego grows, smothering the spirit in its wake, a small inner voice begins to wonder, where is love? Where is being? the fourth step of alchemy. Yet another birth is at hand.
Merlin had grown thoughtful, lost in reflections about the twists and turns of human fate.
Strange and strange again, he muttered to himself. Then he said to Galahad and Percival, "It may take many years, but in time the ego hits upon a new notion. That happiness doesn't lie just in taking, but also in giving. This discovery marks the birth of the giver, which is a happy event because it rids the ego of many kinds of old fears. There is the fear of isolation, which total selfishness must lead to. There is the fear of loss, which arises because you can't hold on to everything forever. And there is the fear of making enemies, those who want to take things from you. By becoming a giver, the ego doesn't have to live with these fears anymore, at least not as much as before. But there is something deeper at work too. Giving connects two people, the giver and the receiver. This connection gives birth to a new sense of belonging, not the passive belonging of the baby who automatically belongs to the mother, but the active belonging of someone who has learned to create happiness. Giving is creative. Before the giver is born, guarding against loss was all important. This meant loss of money and possessions, but also loss of self-image, loss of importance. Miraculously, the giver turns loss into a positive thing. Now the person can part with things freely. Yet this doesn't feel like a loss. Instead, the ego feels pleasure in parting with money or possessions or feelings, all of which had to be jealously hoarded before. How amazing! For the pleasure of taking was never like this.
Galahad looked up from the glowing fire. Love has entered the heart. That's the difference.
Yes. As long as the ego pursues self-interest, it doesn't feel love. It may feel intense pleasure, or self-satisfaction, or attachment. These feelings are sometimes called love, but in its nature, love is selfless, and it takes a selfless act to call love forth. Giving is the first step that takes you outside your narrow circle of ego into the infinite circle of love.
The fourth stage of alchemy, the giver, isn't limited to giving money or things to someone else. There's also service, the giving of oneself, and devotion, the giving of love in pure form. For all these reasons, the birth of the giver feels new and liberating. Even though the ego still dominates, it has begun to look outside itself. Most people learn some pleasure in giving as small children. As part of upbringing, parents teach their child to share with other children. Yet the true birth of the giver may not take place until much later. What's required is a change of intention. As long as you give because you were told to, or because you think it's the right thing to do, the deep satisfaction of giving will not be felt. Giving must be spontaneous, born of the intention, this is what I want to do, not this is what I'd better do. Is giving a sign that the ego is dying? No. In alchemy, there is no death. Nothing has to perish in order to reach the ultimate spiritual goal that we are calling the Grail. There is an old notion that the ego has to die for the spirit to live. But this old notion of ego death assumes that there are things about you that God judges against. I've just said that the ego is controlling and loveless. If God doesn't judge against this, shouldn't he? The inner wizard knows that none of us is judged against in the slightest way. None of our actions is good or bad in God's eyes. But that sounds shocking, because it would seem that a murderer and a saint are equal. What makes them equal is the spiritual perspective. which holds that the sinner and the saint are just masks we temporarily put on. The saint today may be the sinner in another life, and the sinner may be learning to become a saint. All these roles are illusions in God's eyes, because once we take off the masks, each of us is simply pure spirit. The giver is just someone who has decided to drop the mask of being, either as an egotist or as an achiever. One step closer to spirit is being taken. I'm not saying you have to force this perspective on yourself. It's natural to identify with this mask or that, but only as long as they mean something to you. Here is an anecdote from King Arthur's life to underline the point.
It was a miraculous Christmas day in London when young Arthur pulled the sword from the stone. In all the tumultuous crowd that witnessed the deed, none was more surprised than Arthur himself. Where is Merlin, he thought, certain that the wizard had accomplished this feat with magic. But Merlin did not show his face. Deep in the night, long after everyone else had gone to bed, Arthur still sat up, wondering if his destiny really was to be king. "I need you, master," he prayed. Suddenly there was a light under the door. Arthur leapt to his feet and opened it, but the old wizard hadn't come. It was only Kay, his adopted brother. "How are you faring?" Kay asked. Arthur did not know what to say, but as he turned back into the room, he took a sharp breath. "Hold your light higher," he said. Kay raised the candle, and its light fell on 3 objects that had appeared on Arthur's bed: a straw doll, a broken slingshot, and a cracked mirror. "Do you see those?" Arthur asked in a strange voice. Kay looked confused. "I see them, but they mean nothing to me," he said. "I wished for Merlin's help, and now these have appeared," said Arthur. "This moldy straw doll was my first toy. I must have been 2 when Merlin made it for me. This broken slingshot I made from deerskin and forked willow when I was 8. This cracked mirror I found in the woods when I was 12. Do you know what they have in common?" Kay shook his head. "They were the most important things I ever owned, each in its own time, and now look at them," said Arthur, who seemed very moved. "Worthless trash," Kay muttered. "Yet I am overjoyed to see them," Arthur said, "for now I know Merlin has guided me all along. You see, Kay, when I was 2, I only wanted toys. When I was 8, I only wanted to hunt sparrows and squirrels. And when I was 12, I only wanted to look in a mirror, wondering if girls would find me ugly or handsome. All these things I have put behind me, and yet each one was a stepping stone to this very moment. One day, so shall I put away the crown, although it is my sole wish and destiny today." Kay was a simple, stout soul who revered the monarchy. He was shocked. "Why would anyone throw away the crown?" he asked in bewilderment. Arthur replied, "I shall throw it away when it becomes as trivial as a doll, as useless as a broken sling, and as vain as a mirror. I think that's what Merlin wanted me to see."
Giving up power seems very frightening, but it's really like giving up a little child's toys. You grow out of it, and then the surrender is easy. The same holds true for any stage of evolution once it is no longer true to our inner being. We all follow rules of right and wrong, and in social terms, the sinner and the saint appear vastly different. But the values of society don't hold all the answers. Eventually, even the most ego-bound person sees this, and then the stage is set for the next step of alchemy.
Merlin continued his teachings to the 2 knights.
For a long time, the limited individual viewpoint is the only one that seems real to you mortals. You define good as what is good for me. But individuality eventually begins to open up and broaden its horizons. In time, the giver gives birth to the next stage, the birth of the seeker. In this phase, the sense of I is allowed to expand. The giver learned that intense love of others is possible. But now a person reaches out for the source of all love and fulfillment, which even the most intense love of another cannot deliver. The giver who wanted to embrace the world now finds that the world is not a source of fulfillment any longer. Things that once brought pleasure begin to seem flat. In particular, the ego's need for approval and self-importance no longer work to bring satisfaction. A thirst arises to see the face of God, to live in the light, to explore the silence of pure awareness. The seeker's impulse can take many forms. Yet all seekers have in common that the material world does not seem to be the place where their desires can be fulfilled. Why is this? Isn't God everywhere? Isn't Spirit present in the tiniest grain of sand? Yes and no. God may be everywhere, but that does no good if you cannot see where He is. The seeker seeks in order to see the face of the divine. For some mortals, the birth of the seeker is the first time they become aware of a spiritual quest, but actually every stage has been a quest, a single impulse, the impulse to attain complete knowledge and complete fulfillment is what drives all of life forward. You are all seekers waiting to find out who you are.
At his best, the giver is a philanthropist. He started out only by giving to family and friends, then to charities or community. But in the end, the spirit of giving can't feel satisfied until all other humans benefit. Can you really give of yourself to everyone else in the world? This question brings you to the limit of individuality. It is a question only a saint can answer. When you become a seeker, you are able for the first time to put a name on a desire that has remained nameless up to now. Whether the name is God, the Grail, divine being, or spirit doesn't matter. They all point toward a new, deep-felt need, the need to escape the boundaries imposed by time and space. The seeker is the stage of alchemy that draws the divine to you, because a seeker is someone whose desires have expanded to the point that nothing will satisfy them short of meeting God face to face. This isn't a higher desire than wanting toys or money or fame or sex, which were desires born in earlier stages. Toys, money, fame, and sex were the face of God when they were the most important things to you. Anything that you believe will bring you final peace and fulfillment is your version of God. As you grow from one phase to the next, however, you get closer to the real goal. Your image of God becomes truer, nearer to His nature as pure spirit. How does God or pure spirit manifest itself? Everyone gets the version of the divine that they conceive in their hearts. Some see God in visions, some in a flower. Seekers are of infinite kinds. Some require acts of miraculous intervention and redemption. Others follow an invisible force that gently speaks to them in every day of their lives. The seeker is simply motivated by a thirst for higher reality. For the first time, the ego's claim to be all-knowing and all-powerful is questioned. The birth of the seeker, therefore, can be extremely turbulent. Here is how a wizard might put it.
Imagine yourself a carriage pulled down the road by a team of horses. For the longest time, there is no one to guide them but the driver, and he has come to believe that he owns the carriage. Then one day, a soft voice from inside the carriage whispers, "Stop the carriage." At first, the driver doesn't hear the voice, but again it repeats, "Stop the carriage." Unable to believe his ears, the driver whips his horses until they race even more wildly ahead. But the inner voice doesn't use force. It doesn't protest. It only continues to repeat softly, "Stop." That is what is happening inside you. The carriage is yourself, the driver is the ego, the voice inside the carriage is spirit. When spirit softly announces its presence, the ego at first doesn't listen, because it is so certain that its power is absolute. But spirit doesn't need the kind of power that ego is used to. Spirit is simply the quiet voice of being, asserting what is. With the birth of the seeker, this is the voice you start to hear for the first time.
I am a pattern of chaos and order. Swirling atoms of oxygen enter my blood with every breath. Teeming enzymes and proteins are the tide and flood of my cells. Electrical neuronal storms that never cease blast and echo in the endless corridors of my mind. Is this chaos another face of order? The same tugs of gravity that created dancing stars are holding these minuscule strands of DNA, enfolding and unfolding the memories of evolutionary time. We are fooled by appearances. The uncertainty I feel inside me is my doorway to freedom. I'm alive now. I have become unpredictable and odd. Thinking, deciding, choosing, and feeling, I offer these to the automatic side of my brain. And at last, after eons of struggle and pain, I'm learning to surrender to God. Even though the voice of Spirit is silent, it is real. And it announces that there is a higher reality. Some people might think that seekers must be rare, given how strongly we are all attached to ego needs and the material world where these needs get fulfilled. But everyone is born to know Spirit. Seeking, however, is a completely inward experience. You cannot tell from outer signs who is seeking in his heart and who isn't. You will know that you've transformed into a seeker by certain inner signs, a growing enjoyment of solitude, self-reliance in place of social approval, stirrings of being, and a willingness to trust. Addictive patterns will start to disappear. Meditation and prayer become parts of daily life. As all these spiritual manifestations pull you away from the material world, you will find paradoxically a deeper connection to nature, more comfort in your body, and easier acceptance of other people. This is because Spirit is not the opposite of matter. Spirit includes everything. Now we are in the most beautiful stages of alchemy, because from this point on, your higher self expresses itself more and more until you are the higher self. The joyful part of the journey thus begins with the 6th step.
I have told you that the seeker's aim is to see, and soon this happens. The 6th step, the birth of the seer, is just below the surface of any seeker. By itself, seeking carries no fulfillment. It would be a dry and frustrating life if you were only to seek without finding. Fortunately, in the divine plan, all questions carry their answers within them. Once you truly ask, "Where is God?" you will see a response. I don't want to mislead you here. The birth of the seer is just as revolutionary as any of the earlier steps. It spells the end of the ego's ability to identify with anything outside yourself. The seer sees through money, fame, and power. Imagine that your life is a moving picture broadcast upon a white screen. As long as you are dominated by ego, you focus on the moving images and take them to be real, outward images merged into self-image. With the birth of the seer, you turn and face the light. Now self-image is seen for what it is, a flimsy appearance made real by the ego's desperate needs. You also realize that your body itself has been an image. Instead of seeing yourself as a machine of flesh and blood with a spirit inside, now you realize that everything is spirit. The body is spirit in physical form, which the senses can touch, see, and smell. The mind is spirit in thought form, that can be heard and understood. However, spirit itself is more than these. It is seen truly only by the seer.
There is a saying in India that applies to the soul. Those who know it speak of it not. Those who speak of it know it not. What makes spirit so mysterious is that you have to be a seer before you actually see it. Why? If I see this chair, my senses tell me that it is hard, square, perhaps sharp at the corners, and brown. But spirit isn't hard or soft, round or square. It isn't any color. It isn't here or there, before or after. Spirit has no qualities our ordinary senses can pick up. Yet, it is like an energy field that is universal and ever present. This field contains pure intelligence, pure awareness, and out of it, everything is made. You can make an infinity of things, even an infinity of universes, and still the amount of spirit will not be reduced by a single atom. So the seer isn't really seeing anything with the eyes. He's realizing the truth that all is spirit. When you refer to a rock, you can see and touch it and form a mental image of it. When I speak of spirit, however, I'm pointing to an invisible world. Arrows of light fly to us from that world and ignite our souls, but we cannot send arrows of thought back. That sounds very mystical, but a rose would be mystical if you could only think about it and never experience one. Spirit is a direct experience, only it happens to transcend this world of visible, solid things. When you gain knowledge of anything in the visible world, you gain knowledge of something. When you gain knowledge of spirit, you become knowingness itself. All questions cease because you find yourself in the womb of creation, where everything simply is. There is a great peace that comes to you in this stage of growth. When the eye of the seer falls on something, it is simply accepted for what it is, not judged. There is no ego need to conquer or possess or destroy. In the absence of fear, no such motivations arise, for needing to possess is born of lack. When you have no lack to fill, then just being here in your body is the highest spiritual goal you could possibly attain. Spontaneous living becomes possible for the first time. There's a lovely story from Merlin about that.
Small details of nature would often catch Merlin's eye. One day, when he and the boy Arthur were walking in the woods, they heard a jaybird scolding them from a nearby pine tree.
Stop and look.
The jay was a nervous, erratic bird. After chattering at the two intruders, it flew to another branch for a better view. Then, after a few seconds, grew dissatisfied and flew to a third. Next, it forgot that they were there and hopped to the ground to investigate a pine cone. In a matter of seconds, it splashed in a small pool, chased a gray wren, and started pecking at a piece of rotten bark.
What do you think of that as a way of life?
Very little. He seems like a brainless featherball that has no idea what to do next.
So it appears, whenever a creature lives solely trusting in God. It spends its day following one impulse after another with no thought to the future, and yet it gets along well enough, you have to admit.
This little lesson tells us that it is possible to live with total trust in spirit. Even though we may revere and hold seers in awe, their life is really very simple. They follow whatever they feel in the moment, trusting that it is a pure impulse of their souls. In this sixth step of the seer, we are getting back to innocence once more, free of fear and the ego's ulterior motives. its constant need to defend and possess. Thus, the seer lives very close to the source of love. Once you rid your perception of fear, what you see is love. Ultimately, there's nothing else. Merlin now takes us into the full light of the sun with the seventh and last stage of alchemy.
It's hard to imagine that there could be any higher stage of life than the seer, Galahad said after a moment, deeply impressed by Merlin's discourse.
Be careful with that word, higher. It's the ego that must have high and low. The goal of your life is freedom and fulfillment, as I've said several times. Fulfillment isn't achieved until you know God as completely as He knows Himself. You mortals are always yearning for miracles, and I tell you that the greatest miracle is yourself, for God has gifted you with this unique ability to identify with His nature. A perfect rose yet does not sense that it is a rose. A fulfilled human knows what it means to be divine.
Can this state be described? Asked Percival.
Yes, it is the seventh and final step of alchemy, pure spirit. When it dawns, the seer finds that what seems to be total joy and fulfillment can still expand. You see, arriving in the presence of God is not the end of your quest, but the beginning. You began in innocence, and so shall you end. But this time the innocence is different because you have gained complete knowledge, whereas a baby has only feeling. When you are able to see yourself as pure spirit, your identification with this body and this mind will cease. The very concepts of birth and death will cease. Instead, you will be a cell in the body of the universe, and this cosmic body will be as intimate to you as your own body is to you now.
The earlier stages of spiritual transformation are guided from within by the inner wizard. With this seventh step, the realization of pure spirit, you become the wizard. What does this mean? Many accepted beliefs change to their very core. For example, birth for a wizard is merely the idea, I have this body, and death is merely the idea, I no longer have this body. Since wizards are not under the illusion of space and time, any body they take on is seen as a pattern of energy, any mind as a pattern of information. These patterns change, they come and go, but the wizard himself is beyond change. Mind and body are like rooms one might choose to live in, but not all the time. The wizard chooses to live a life of spirit in its eternal, timeless power and purity. No amount of mental activity can approximate this final transformation or bring it to you. Spirit is born of pure silence. Your internal dialogue must cease. Your fragmented self, driven by desires of every kind and description, will be unified at last, and like the baby that was your beginning, you will feel no doubt, no shame, no guilt. The ego's addiction to duality resulted in a world of good and bad, right and wrong, light and shadow. Now you will see that these opposites are fused. Such is God's perspective, for everywhere she looks, all she sees is herself. To say that life is a miracle sounds like a cliche, but that is the natural perspective of someone who has transcended all boundaries to live the totally free life of the wizard. The miracle of life dawns in 3 phases. First, you begin to witness miracles. Second, you begin to create miracles. Third, you become the miracle. What does miracle mean? It means creating anything you want from your own intention, to join the Creator as co-creator of your own reality. In the final stage of alchemy, the state of unity, every desire you have speaks directly to the creative mechanics of nature. There is no separation between the dreamer and the dream. Therefore, all possibilities are open to you. After all, the field of pure awareness is nothing but infinite possibilities. It is the raw spirit from which all of creation pours. The birth into spirit is a tremendous event which each of us is destined for. As unity ripens, you will become more and more familiar with the divine, until finally you will experience God as an infinite being moving at infinite space through infinite dimensions at infinite speed. When that experience dawns, it will seem as natural and simple as sitting here today or looking up at night at the stars. Yet each dancing star will be yourself. Having taken you full circle from innocence to innocence, I want to end with Merlin's version of unity, the final achievement of the Holy Grail.
Well, as often happens when wizards speak, the two knights felt themselves transformed into the very state of pure spirit that Merlin had been describing. Galahad looked up at the night sky and suddenly felt as though he could touch the stars. A sense of truly belonging in the world suffused his heart. "We are home," Percival whispered to himself.
Do not be overawed. In truth, this is your natural state. To be unified with the cosmos, to be intimate with life in all its forms, to finally come into oneness with your own being. This is the destiny your quest has sought.
And Galahad murmured, "In the end, we return to the beginning."
Yes. Each of you begins in love, goes through struggle, suffering, and passion, only to end in love again. You mortals long for miracles, and as privileged children of the universe, you will be denied nothing. Spirit is the state of the miraculous, which is the state of pure creativity. Like a rich golden glow, you will see the divine awareness shining through everything your eyes behold. The world becomes illuminated from within, and there is no doubt that matter is simply spirit made manifest. And although you will seem to reside still in a body, it will only be a grain of being on the shores of this infinite ocean of being that is yourself.
The two knights had no notion of how long this exposition of Merlin's had taken. They seemed to be lifted into a space where nested spheres opened one after another like flower petals. And as the last opened, a transparent diamond could be barely seen rotating on its center. "What is it?" Galahad wanted to ask, but dared not.
Behold, the Grail. The unfolding of your quest has led to a vision of its goal. A point of pure light, the diamond essence that burns within your soul. Live in devotion to this moment. I have led you here out of your inmost desire, but now you must win the Grail, not just its vision for yourself. Symbols change from age to age, but always and ever, the Grail is the crystal speck of being in your own heart. One day you will look back upon this night and ask, "Who are you, Merlin?" From beyond the reach of time, I answer you thus. I am the one who has no need for miracles. I am a wizard, and for me, to be here is miracle enough. What could be more miraculous than life itself?
With the fading of the light, the old one was gone. Percival and Galahad looked at each other without a word, almost shyly. The charm of Merlin's speech still held them, and when it started to fade, they both trembled, regretting their return to Earth. When dawn rose, they began to make their way back to the castle. In the golden birth of dawn, Percival saw King Arthur standing at the window of his chambers. He was looking directly at them. "Do you think we should tell of this?" Percival said, gesturing toward the castle. Galahad shook his head. "No, I'm certain that the king knows what has happened. Why, it must have happened to him, or why else would he be so reluctant to speak of the Grail? But I'll tell you what, Brother Knight, I would like Arthur to know that we are with him in this quest of Merlin's." Let us agree to call this the Night of the Crystal Cave. The king will know what we mean, for that is where he was taught the wizard's secrets long ago. And although they had been in no cave, but out under the canopy of a spangled sky, Sir Percival instantly agreed.
And such is the story of self-transformation. As T.S. Eliot has said, we shall not cease from exploration, and the end of our exploring is to arrive where we started from and know the place for the first time. It is a journey without distance, and yet, at the end of this journey, we are transformed. We have become wizards.